49ers to the forefront.
It's go time. This is the best team that they can put on the field this year.
Welcome to 49ers Forecast.
You guys are going to hear it. The latest from the locker room, the latest from the podium, the latest scuttle from the players.
On your proud home of 49ers football. Touchdown! KNBR, the sports leader. Your faithful fix with your host Larry Krueger begins now.
And away we go. Welcome to 49er Forecast on a beautiful Saturday morning here in Northern California in mid-October. The Niners, it's week 7, getting ready to take on the Atlanta Falcons. We'll all be down there tomorrow night for national TV, NBC football, the Niners and the Falcons. And Mac Jones will be starting at quarterback for the 49ers. Michael Penix starting for the Atlanta Falcons. And it should be a hell of a game. And we got a great hour for you. Falcons color analyst David Archer is going to stop by. Arch and I worked together in the Canadian Football League in the mid-90s. I was their defensive quality control grunt, and he was the starting quarterback on the team. And he's a great guy. And he's a terrific guy. We've had a chance to play golf a few times at Rancho Murieta back in the day, because that's where the gold miners complex was up there. For the late great Fred Anderson was the owner of the team, and we were all set up. We had our training camp and everything, our facilities up at Rancho Murieta. Kay Stevenson was the head coach. This was the American expansion of the Canadian League, which only lasted a few years. There was a team in Baltimore, Vegas, Sacramento, Memphis, a few others. There were San Antonio eventually had a team. The CFL dabbled in the American expansion there in the mid-90s, and it was kind of at the end of the World League. And David Archer had played for Kay Stevenson in the World League and started playing Canadian football. And, you know, Dave's played everywhere. Dave played in the NFL. Dave played in Canada, finished up in Edmonton. But we've maintained a friendship through the years, and now he has been, for a number of years, the voice of the Atlanta Falcons. He's the color analyst. Him and Wes Durham are on the call on, I forget, it's 92.9 or something like that. They're on the FM dial. But they are the radio team, Wes Durham and David Archer. And so we'll talk with David Archer about what he thinks of this matchup between the 49ers and the Falcons. And I'm a little nervous about this one. I'd love to hear from you. 808 KNBR is the phone number if you want to chime in. How do you feel about the 49ers after 6 games? You know, they're 4-2. They're coming off a loss to Tampa last week. Brock Purdy's still banged up. They're going with Mac Jones again this week. And the trade deadline's looming. And there's a lot of talk about the 49ers potentially making a trade. And there's even a late rumor this morning. I think Rand Carthon, former Niner executive, weighed in on what the Niners ought to do. Somebody asked Rand, hey, what do you think? What are the 49ers going to do at the trade deadline? And Rand now works for CBS Sports. He's also a former GM of the Tennessee Titans and former Niner executive. And Rand said, a name that I want everyone to keep an eye on is Arden Key, who's an outside linebacker edge for the Tennessee Titans. This is Carthon on CBS Sports earlier in the week. He said, obviously, they just let go of their head coach. He's a guy that's on an expiring contract. He played there in 2021, where he resurrected his career. He said it wasn't for Robert Saleh, but it was under DeMeco Ryans, but it was under defensive line coach Chris Kasarik. So that's a name to keep an eye on there because he gives you an edge presence, but he also made his hay rushing inside, which will then allow them to continue bringing along Mikael Williams. So the Niners were linked to a lot of different edge rushers earlier in the week when Jeremy Fowler and Graziano from ESPN wrote a kind of a comprehensive trade piece and said, hey, you know, all these guys are out there, and the Niners would love to have Trey Hendrickson. I think after watching Thursday night where the Bengals beat the Steelers with Joe Flacco, I don't get the sense that the Bengals are getting ready to back up the truck. I don't get the sense that the Bengals are getting ready to sell Trey Hendrickson. Would he be awesome? Yeah, he'd be incredible. Are you kidding me? These guys had 35 sacks the last 2 years combined. You could make an argument he's an upgrade from Nick Bosa at this juncture based on the last couple of years of production. So Trey Hendrickson, it sounds like, is the apple of their eye, and if they could make a trade for him, they probably would. Now, the price, what's the price going to be? How does the Fred Warner and Nick Bosa injuries impact, Lynch's desire or, attitude about making a trade? He went on with Murph and Marcus earlier this week on the KNBR morning show and said, basically, hey, look, we're doing our due diligence. We're making the calls. We're involved in a lot of good dialogue. They're staying in the deal flow, so to speak, and they're going to figure it out. The one thing about John Lynch, he's made that midseason trade popular. I mean, when he came to the Niners, hardly anybody was seeking these midseason trades. And then John traded for Trent Williams. That wasn't midseason, but he traded for, other guys, Charles Omenihu, Jordan Willis, Emmanuel Sanders, Christian McCaffrey, and very much popularized the midseason trade to the point now where I think there's more bidders. There's more teams that want to buy because they're like, you know what? Yeah, 49ers did it, and they reached, the Super Bowl a couple times. And so I do think Lynch is going to probably pounce and do something. The question is what? And I do get the sense from talking to Kyle Shanahan every now and then about this and hearing his answers that they don't want to trade their 2026 first-round pick. And I think that's because it's just earmarked to be the replacement for Trent Williams. I mean, the Niners are, on record as saying, Chris Foerster's on record as saying, hey, we don't have to use first-round picks on our offensive linemen. We can find guys. And they've proven it, right? Dom Pooney, who's not necessarily playing great at this moment, but is a pretty good player. And I think is just probably regressed a little bit because of the injuries. And I think him and Colby are a good guard tandem, but they're both banged up. Colby's got the groin, Dom's got the knee. Neither are moving all that well. And to me, this is a major part of this game is how well can the Niners, run the ball. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But this is going to be a very, very interesting football game because you got a Falcons team that beat the Commanders, just beat Buffalo, and they play a ton of man-to-man. And they bring a lot of pressure. I asked Kubiak about it this week. He's like, yeah, they bring, they do play a ton of man, but they also have they'll play some shells, as he says, basically another word for zone. They'll play some zones, and they'll intersperse them, into their defensive game plan. But they play the highest percentage of cover one man to man of any team in the league. They also blitz at the highest rate of any team in the league. So it's going to be a huge, huge challenge for the 49ers offensive line. It's going to be a huge challenge for Mac Jones. Niners are going to have to get the run game going, and they're going to have to somehow, if they can't get the run game going, they got to get the ball out quick. They're going to have to get the ball out quick. What has been the most frustrating part about the beginning of this season? The Niners have Christian McCaffrey. He's one of the best running backs in pro football, and they can't run the ball. And it's not like one game. Oh, it was just one game. No, they have not been able to run the ball. Christian McCaffrey in his career averages 4.6 a carry. This year, he's averaging 3.1 yards per carry. The Niners in this game need to get the run game going. Now, there's reasons to believe that it may click this week. Why? It's a good question because it hasn't clicked up to now. One, Atlanta's given up 114 rushing yards per game. So they're of the teams that the Niners have played in the last 6 weeks, this is the worst statistical rush defense that they're going against. They got to be able to get it going against the Falcons, who are giving up 114 yards per game on the ground. That's number one. Number two, George Kittle's back. And George Kittle said he plans to return against the Falcons. I think probably the most disturbing information we got this week is that George has a completely torn hamstring. He didn't just pull it. It wasn't like a little bit of a yank or some kind of a nagging pull. No, he tore the hamstring all the way through, which he didn't make a huge, it wasn't like, you didn't see him go down in a heap. And I just, it would have, to me, it would have seemed, we would have seen more, but no, that's the deal. It's a torn deal. So what does that mean? I'm not really sure. Does that mean that he's going to come back and he's not going to be able to run? He's going to come back and he's not going to really be able to open up his stride? Is he going to be limited as a runner? Is he going to be more utilized? They need him as a blocker. I mean, they really need his leadership at this point. Without Fred, without Bosa, they need his leadership. And he is the kind of guy that he is the strut of the 49er offense, is Kittle. When Kittle's in there, there's a swagger about them. There's a vibe. He brings juice. There's a bounce in his step. He brings confidence. I think he gives the group confidence. So him back in the lineup, I think, is a big deal for the Niners' confidence. And I'm hoping it's going to be a huge deal for the Niners' run game. They have to be able to stop the run and run the ball. We can talk about Purdy, we can talk about Jones, we can talk about, pass rushers and nickel corners and coverage and specialty. None of it's going to matter at all if they cannot run the ball better than they have and do a decent job of stopping the run. Now, stopping the run this week is going to be a huge challenge. There is no Fred Warner, and here comes Bijan Robinson. And you say, Bijan Robinson, what makes this guy so good? Well, first of all, he is so good. He leads the NFL with 822 total yards. It's an amazing number, really. Why do I think it's amazing? Well, CMC, by the way, is second with 780 total yards. Most of those coming receiving, by the way. CMC's been a revelation as a receiver. He just can't get the running game going. But Bijan has 822 total yards. The reason it's so spectacular is he's played one fewer game than almost every other back in the league. The Falcons had the early week 4 bye or whatever it was. They've already had their bye week. So he's got 822 total yards in one fewer game than most of the other backs in the league. So, I mean, that's amazing right there to lead the league in total yards, and you're down a game. I mean, it's especially early in the year, but Bijan's been amazing. He's averaging almost 6 yards a carry, 5.8 a carry. The other thing that's going to be really interesting in this game is the 49ers, Upton Stout came up with an injury late in the week on the shoulder, and he may not go. Now, we asked Shanahan, how about Demo Lenore? Is Demo Lenore, going to go? At on the outside corner, or is he going to play nickel? And Shanahan was like, well, he can always play that slot corner because he's really good at it. And he's like, he was non-committal. But he also said that Darrell Luter Jr. had the best week of practice he's ever had. I think the 49ers, I'm not saying the injury to Stout's not legit. I'm sure it is. But it's also, I think, about the matchup. One of the things that stands out when you watch the Atlanta Falcons film is that they have a big basketball player receiver in Drake London. I say basketball player because he's a former basketball player, and he plays wide receiver in the red zone like a basketball player. Him and Penix have a great chemistry. Sometimes on the short stuff, the quick game, they feature Drake London, and he's a big receiver who's got, 35-inch, 36-inch vert. So you're talking about a 6'3", 6'4" receiver who can get up in the air. Upton Stout's a tiny little corner. I just think maybe the Niners want to get a bigger bodied corner on the field. I'm not saying that Stout's not hurt, but the matchup doesn't favor the 49ers. You would think that if you're Atlanta, if you could get Upton Stout in the slot at 6'4", in the red zone or on the goal line or in the end zone against a Upton Stout, you can just throw it up to him. You got a 5'8" corner, you got a 6'3" receiver with hops. So I think Drake London's usage in the quick game is maybe making the Niners consider putting a bigger, maybe moving Lenore inside, but maybe not. Maybe just going with Luter. I don't think they would play Luter inside, but I definitely think they'd like a bigger body. So maybe they would play Lenore in the slot and then play Renardo Green and Darrell Luter on the outside. It's definitely something to look for at the beginning of this game, how the Niners match up. Now, the Niners are catching a little bit of a break in that the Falcons rookie, Jalen Walker, is out of this game. He's got a groin strain. He's a really good football player. Rookie out of Georgia, tremendous player. And so he's out. And then Billy Bowman, they really hit on both their safeties. Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame, and they drafted Billy Bowman, who's a smallish safety out of Oklahoma. And both those guys have been really good, but now Bowman's out. So no Billy Bowman, no Jalen Walker, no Ray McLeod. Oddly enough, they sent Ray home. And Raheem Morris called it a private matter. And even the beat writers kind of referenced it like there was some ongoing issue there with Ray. Ray was a good 49er, and I don't think was any kind of an attitude problem or discipline problem at all. So I'll be interested to see exactly what the backstory is on why he was sent home. But no Jalen Walker, no Ray McLeod, no Billy Bowman. So I think that's advantage 49ers. This Falcons team is a really interesting team. Why are they so interesting? Well, this is a team that signed Kirk Cousins just as recently as last March of 2024. They signed Kirk Cousins to a 4-year, $180 million deal. It's a lot of Arthur Blank's cash. $100 million of Arthur Blank's cash guaranteed. Now, he's a very, very wealthy man, but still, $100 million guaranteed for Kirk Cousins. Less than 4 weeks later, we're talking about literally 3.5 weeks later, they use the 8th pick in the draft on Michael Penix. And they draft a Washington Husky quarterback in the first round of the draft after they just paid Kirk. And I'm sure Cousins was like, what's going on? What's going on here? And then Kirk had an okay year. Suffered an injury late in the year, and they pulled him, and they went to Penix, and they've stayed with Penix this year. And Penix is good, but he's raw. He's really raw. He throws kind of a flat ball. He's got one of the greatest arms of all time. He's a lefty with one of the greatest arms you're ever going to see. I mean, this guy can throw lasers. I saw Michael Penix in a game in Seattle. It was a Thursday night football game. The wind was howling at like 35 miles an hour. The team they were playing, the quarterback didn't even attempt any passes. They were just 100% run because the wind was howling. Not Penix. His laser show was just cutting right through the 35-mile-an-hour winds. So he's got one of the all-time arms. I mean, it's right there with the greatest. Flacco, Bradshaw, Jeff George, whoever the greatest throwers of the football in the history of the game are, Michael Penix is right there. This guy can absolutely put on a laser show all over the place. And now he's got really good weapons. Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. They got 2 outstanding guards. This is just it. Suddenly this Falcon team looks pretty good. I mean, it's really amazing the turnaround. They were 8-9 last season, and now, I mean, if you look at them last year Atlanta was 6th in total offense and 23rd in total defense. They bring in Jeff Ulbrich to coordinate the defense. Here we are. It's week 7. They're 2nd in total offense and they're 1st in total defense. So they've had a huge turnaround. Especially on the defensive side of the ball. Last year, Atlanta was 31st in the NFL in sacks. They only had 31 on the year. They have 14 right now through, a handful of games, 6 games, 14 sacks. So that was their weakness. And Terry Fontenot, who was in New Orleans under Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton for a long time, he came into this year a little bit on the hot seat. But what a draft he had. He drafted Jalen Walker at 15. Then he traded next year's number 1 back into the first round at 26 and took James Pierce, the edge rusher from Tennessee. And then he found 2 excellent young safeties later on, Xavier Watts and Billy Bowman. So it was a really good draft for the GM. Fontenot probably saved his gig. But Atlanta's desperate. I mean, they've missed the playoffs for 7 straight seasons, and they're looking for the quick turnaround. And they named Ulbrich the defensive coordinator who came over from the Jets. And then he had the controversy in the offseason because his son crank called and pretended to be an NFL team. And he called Shedeur Sanders, and that obviously brought a lot of embarrassment, I'm sure, to Ulbrich. I mean, first of all, nobody's got a sense of humor anymore, but you can't screw with people like that. And Ulbrich's kid was doing it. And I'm sure Ulbrich, he probably yelled at his kid like, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? So they go as Michael Penix goes, and Penix is a great talent, but he's not quite there yet, which makes this game really interesting. If you looked at Penix's numbers last year, 58%, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks, and 3 starts. Pretty okay, just okay. He had a great start late in the year where he blew up and had a monster performance. But he's kind of a week-to-week guy, and he throws the ball better to his left than he does to his right. He's a lefty quarterback. He throws it to his kind of the open field, his open side, with more accuracy than he does when he throws it to the right side of the field. He sprays it when he tries to throw it, basically to his non-open side. And it has a lot to do with the mechanics. We'll ask Archer about it and see what he has to say about it, because he's watching this guy pretty close. If the Niners do have an advantage in this game, Atlanta is without their number one offensive tackles on both sides. Caleb McGarry went out a couple weeks ago with an injury, and Jake Matthews, I believe, is out as well. So Atlanta's going to go with backup tackles. The big matchup to watch in this game is going to be the Atlanta guards, Chris Lindstrom, who was a second-team All-Pro last year, and Matthew Bergeron against Big Jordan Elliott and Alfred Collins and Kalia and whoever else, CJ West. The Niner tackles are going to have to stand up against these Atlanta offensive guards and somehow try to close down the run game, and don't let Bijan just dominate. And then the other big move that Fontenot made in the offseason, free agency-wise, he signed Divine Diablo, one of the great names in the NFL. The former Raider, former converted defensive back who's now a linebacker, and Diablo's given them a ton of second-level speed. So they're rushing the passer. They've got 14 sacks by 10 different guys. I asked Shanahan earlier in the week, I said, Kyle, I'm watching their film. They got 14 sacks by 10 different guys. They got guys coming from everywhere. What do you see? And he's like, I see a lot of talented young players. I see a lot of talented young players in the midst of a pretty good scheme, and they know what they're doing. So this is going to be, to say this is going to be a challenge for the 49ers, doesn't even speak to it. Bijan's a superstar. Can the Niners stop him? This is the 49ers bring the number one pass offense into this game, but the Falcons have the number one pass defense. And I asked Kubiak, I said, hey, man, you're going to get a ton of man-to-man. You're going to get a ton of pressure. What else do they show? And he's like, yeah, and they'll throw in some zones as well. So there's going to be some occasional zones. But the Atlanta plays the highest percentage of cover one in the league. They're playing man-to-man, and then they're blitzing. They got the highest blitz percentage in the league, and they bring the blitz a ton on third downs. So 49ers are going to be challenged. Niners offensive line is going to be hugely challenged in this game. Mac Jones is going to be hugely challenged in this game. And by the way, if you want to get the run game going, now would be a pretty good time. This would be a pretty good time to get it going. And as far as the challenge for the Niner defense, Atlanta has got the number one rush offense in pro football. They lead the NFL in rush attempts per game. They stick with it. It's going to be a lot of Bijan. It's going to be a lot of Tyler Algier. And how do the Niners replace Fred Warner? Tatum Bethune's going to play the Mike linebacker. He's going to wear the green dot. I think he's going to be quite a bit better, guys, than what he was last week against Tampa, because he'll have the full week of practice and the reps. But we may see Robert Saleh with some wrinkles that we have not seen before, or even wrinkles that we have seen before. We're just going to see more of it. For example, I think we may see some big nickel where the Niners go with 3 safeties. You may see a 3 safety look. One of the things that was really clear is when Fred went out last week, Tampa feasted in the middle of the field. They scored touchdowns on 3 of the next 4 possessions after Fred went out on the cart. And then on throws between the numbers in the middle of the field, Baker Mayfield went bananas. He absolutely was just owning the middle of the field last week. Mayfield on throws between the numbers last week against the Niners after Fred went out, 11 for 13 for 154 yards and a touchdown. So they got to tighten it up in the middle of the field. We're going to see Nick Martin. I'm eager to see how do they utilize Nick Martin. Do they utilize him as a blitzer? Does he play a little bit of Mike? Does he play on the weak side? Does he get in there from scrimmage? How exactly do they utilize Nick Martin? He's too fast and too explosive and too athletic to not get on the field. And he's on the field this week. So it should be really interesting to see what he can get done. All right, let's do this. Let's take a timeout. David Archer is going to stop by, the color analyst for the Atlanta Falcons. He's in town. Him and Wes Durham will be on the call on the Falcons radio network. We'll get his thoughts on the Niners and the Falcons as we continue. It's 49er Forecast on a Saturday on the Sports Leader.
KNBR, the Sports Leader. Faithful, time to make some Niners noise. 49ers Forecast with Larry Krueger now continues on your proud home of 49ers football. KNBR, the sports leader.
All right, welcome back to Niners Nightly, and with us, the color analyst for the Atlanta Falcons, the great David Archer, is on the line. Dave, how are you?
I'm good, man. Yeah, you can't sling that grade around, man. You got to hang on to that. That's not necessarily me. I appreciate the kind words, but hopefully I'm good. I don't know that I'm great. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, I've always thought of you as great. Of course, we worked together back with the Gold Miners back in the day, and you had a phenomenal arm. I think our quarterbacks, you were the starter. Kerwin Bell might have been your backup back then. But now you're covering the Falcons, and the Falcons have maybe one of the great throwers of the football, maybe of all time, in Penix. How would you describe Penix's arm?
No, the great might be a good connotation to slap on him. He can make all the throws. There's no question about it. Young guy, still played a lot of college football, certainly when he was at Indiana and in Washington, and had a dynamic last couple of years as a Washington Husky. Got a chance to play late in the season last year for the Falcons. You could see some of that come alive in a couple of throws he made last year, and certainly he's continued that this year. Still learning the game, still learning what he can and can't get away with, but the arm talent is certainly there. I think every portion of the field's available to him.
And who does he have? I mean, London, it seemed like, was his favorite receiver last week. Is that pretty much his favorite receiver every week? I mean, Drake London was a first-round pick, and it seems like he's really coming into his own right now.
Yeah, Drake's been pretty good. Drake had a monster year last year, 100 catches, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns. He's since become kind of that guy that if you're the opposing team, better find number 5 because he's going to get the bulk of the looks. He had 16 targets last weekend, so he's a guy that's going to catch a lot of balls. Now, the thing that makes Drake really difficult, he's got a basketball background, so his ability to 50-50 balls that are up high, he can go up and get it at 6'4", 6'5", got a tremendous wingspan, but he can also play that basketball game in the middle. He had a touchdown last weekend in the win over Buffalo, or last Monday night against Buffalo, where he actually kind of screened the defender off and just reached out and plucked the ball out of the sky and got it over the goal line. So he's got a multiplicity of ways of catching the football. And he can run too. A lot of people feel like, he's long and lanky and he doesn't run that well. He ran a slant and almost got in right in before the half and outran everybody to the goal line. So there's a lot to Drake that I think people are still trying to figure out, but there's no question he's wide receiver 1 for the Falcons.
Dave, my good buddy is Ray McLeod. He was a great Niner. How's Ray doing? How do they utilize him?
Well, Ray's one of those speed guys, as you know, got return ability in his background. So what they do is they use Ray in a lot of the jet sweeps. He's a guy that's in motion a great deal. You'd like to get him the football on the move. Penix is hooked up with Ray on a couple of big plays down the field as well. You get him in the slot matched up maybe against that third corner or fourth corner. He's going to take that guy to task because he's going to run those deep corner routes, those deep in cuts. And because of his speed, he can run away. So, yeah, Ray's an integral part of this thing. Haven't gotten him the ball as much this year. He had a career high last year, almost 700 yards receiving last year. Hope to get Ray going here in this second third of the season.
What's going on with Cousins? I mean, are they going to keep Cousins? Does Cousins, want to be there? I mean, it just seems like I love Penix, and I think Penix is the future. But man, I mean, the way the Falcons look right now, it kind of makes me intrigued at what they would look like if Cousins ever got back in there. He's got that, he's such a great processor. How's Kirk Cousins handling being a backup?
Well, as you know from last year, I mean, he had a monster start to the season. Had 2 huge games against Tampa, threw for over 500 yards against Tampa on a Thursday night. Guided Atlanta to an overtime win against the Bucs in division. We were 6-3 at one point, and then Kirk got a little banged up in the New Orleans game. And whether somebody didn't read it right or whether he didn't tell anybody he was hurt, he began to get into a little bit of funk, and that's what led to Penix getting into the games late in the season. We missed the playoffs, but there's no question Kirk's had a big-time career. You're right. His ability to process and get the ball out and to the right guy is at the upper level when you start talking about the quarterbacks that are available. As far as what Atlanta's going to do with him, they had talked about, hey, we know we got to pay him. His stuff's guaranteed. So unless somebody wants to pick up that contract, which is huge, upwards of over $30 million, unless they're going to pick up that tab and then give up something from a draft standpoint, Atlanta figured, hey, we've already allocated the money for the quarterback room. Just so happens we're paying more to the backup guy than we are the starter. But, hey, that money was already allocated. We knew we were going to have to pay it. We just anticipated Kirk being the starter this year. You've got the best backup quarterback in the National Football League. He's worked well with Penix. He and Penix have an outstanding relationship with one another. In fact, they even ride to games together, I think, down to the airport before we take off. So, I think he's more of a positive than a negative. In the heart of hearts, Kirk would like to be somebody playing. He wants to be somewhere playing. There's no question about that. But he's not been a detriment. He's been a really good teammate. And right now, unless somebody's willing to give some stuff up for him, Atlanta's just going to hang on to him and keep the best backup quarterback in the National Football League.
Yeah, I've had him on the show a few times. He's a great dude. He's got mental maturity, so he can handle this situation. But I would love to see him play, and I understand why he wants to play. How about Pitts? I mean, Kyle Pitts coming out of college was supposed to be like awesome, and he's had some injuries. He was a little bit derailed, but it seems like he's getting his career back going again. How's Pitts look this year, Dave?
Yeah, it's a good call. He had a monster rookie year, went to the Pro Bowl, over 1,000 yards receiving. Had a really good year his rookie year. Matt Ryan was his quarterback, and then we've had a revolving door at quarterback. That's been a detriment to him a little bit in the last couple of seasons. And you mentioned the injured his knee in week 8 of his second season. Really struggled to get back the next year. Wasn't really the same guy. And then we started to see some of it get back to where it was supposed to be last year. And then this year, he's just got a different attitude. He and Michael Penix spent a lot of time together in the offseason. They both knew that Mike was going to be the starter for this year, and, playing golf, just hanging out together, throwing the football, and there's a chemistry there. Now, we haven't gotten him the ball as much as we need to, and that's something that Michael's going to have to work on, the distribution of the football. He's getting the ball to Drake, we talked about, and he's getting the ball to Bijan Robinson, but Kyle's a guy that is available, and I think that that's something they would like to do, and I think Kyle is in that mode where he wants to contribute, plus it's a contract year. He knows that he's got to show out if he wants to get paid. So there's a lot of reasons for Kyle to be big time this year.
One of the things I learned when we were together in Sacramento is how to watch film, with pro coaches. And so I did get a chance to watch the All-22 quite a bit this week on Penix. And Dave, I'll tell you what I see. I see a guy who looks amazing, but he also his ball's a little flat sometimes, and when he's throwing to the right side of the field, I don't know if the accuracy on going to the right side of the field doesn't seem the same to me as when he's throwing it in the middle of the field or to the left. What do you see? I mean, you're a smart football guy. You've been watching it for a long time. What do you see with Penix? Are there any trends or tendencies that you've noticed?
No, it's an interesting analogy. I think that there's some accuracy to it, certainly. For a quarterback, naturally, your ability to throw the ball to your open side is going to naturally happen. You naturally get your leg out of the way that's in front there, and you naturally open your hips up. You have to work at getting the ball to your closed side, or the side where you got to get your leg out of the way. So for Penix, that would be throwing to his right. And trying to get that right leg out of the way so he can clear his hips and throw the ball with velocity, throw the ball with some accuracy, has certainly waned a little bit. I think you're right on that. I think some of it has to do with his footwork, and that's where, most quarterbacks that have abilities to get to their second, third, fourth read, if you have time, that's going to take some footwork, and I think that's something Michael's still working on. I think that you see a lot of these guys that are shotgun guys coming out of college or pistol guys coming out of college have a tendency to have dead feet to a certain extent, and they've got to really work on their footwork. Back when I was playing, a lot of the stuff you did on first and second down, certainly, you were coming out from underneath center, so you had to get your feet working to get your depth, and then you had to get through your reads, so you're constantly rotating your feet, keeping your feet alive. I think some of these guys, some of their technique, some of their fundamentals from a footwork standpoint aren't the greatest, and I would say Michael probably falls into that category.
We're talking to David Archer, who's the Falcons color analyst. He'll be on the call with Wes Durham this weekend on the Falcons radio network. Dave, Terry Fontenot has got some great momentum going here. He had a great career coming up behind Mickey Loomis in New Orleans. Talk a little bit about Fontenot, because it seems like Fontenot and Raheem Morris right now have a good vibe going. They've got a good momentum coming out of this draft cycle.
Yeah, I think what Terry learned in New Orleans was certainly advantageous for him to advance his career. They've taken a lot of people, a lot of good draft picks, a lot of good free agent signings in that New Orleans area, especially when Breeze was the quarterback there and Sean Payton was there. There was a lot to learn, and I think he really absorbed a lot of stuff. Brought it over here to Atlanta. He's had some really good drafts. Obviously, we've got a young core of players that we're leaning on. The Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Penix, that you mentioned, Kyle Pitts. We now are starting to feel a little bit about this defensive group that he's got. He drafted 2 kids in the secondary. They're starting. Billy Bowman and Xavier Watts are starting in the secondary. And then, of course, Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. are rookies that we were able to draft, got an extra number 1 pick and drafted those 2 guys, and they've paid dividends with this defense that Jeff Ulbrich is kind of fashioned into a pretty good one here early in the year. And a lot of that has to do with some of the picks. And Brandon Dorlus from last year didn't play much. He's playing on the defensive line. Ruka Rororo out of Clemson was a second-round pick a year ago. So a lot of these young players that Terry's put on the team are starting to come to fruition here. And I think that it says a lot about his research. It says a lot about the team that he's got around him. But also one of the things that he does is he listens really well. And I think he's in lockstep with Raheem Morris and their coordinators, Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich, the defensive coordinator, as to what they're looking for that they can fill these spots for in the philosophies they have offensively and defensively. So as much as he's a good talent evaluator, I think he's a great listener too. And I think that his team around him have done a nice job.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Jeff Ulbrich is a friend, and he was a great Niner. I love Ulbrich, and I think he might be one of the best young defensive coaches in the game. Talk to us about their defense, because they play a ton of man. I was looking at the numbers, Dave. Highest percentage of cover 1 in the NFL is the Atlanta Falcons. They play a ton of man, and they also bring a ton of pressure. They've got the highest blitz percentage in the league. They especially bring it on third down. Talk to us about what you're seeing. What is the strength of Ulbrich's defense? Because there's a lot of pressure and a lot of man-to-man coverage.
Yeah, I think that you just said it. It's their aggressiveness. They want to play aggressive. They want to get after you. They know you're going to make some plays. They know it's an offensive game in the National Football League now, centered around taking care of the quarterback and the receivers. So he understands, and his team understands, they're going to make plays, but they're also going to make their share of plays, because they're going to have their teeth out and they're going to come after you. They're going to force you to make plays. They're going to force you to make quick decisions. And Brick has brought that down from what he learned from Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator for the Niners now. I mean, he worked for Saleh up in New York. They had one of the best defenses in the league for a number of years. I think they were ranked 3 twice and 4 once over the last 3 seasons in total defense. And that's the influence of Robert Saleh. He talks openly about, does Jeff Ulbrich, about what he learned from Coach Saleh in coordinating defense and what to look for and how to get ready each and every week, what the game plan's supposed to look like, but also play to your who you are. And what he wants to do is they pick gaps, they get upfield. They're not a gap control defense. They're obviously guys are assigned gaps, but they're going to attack their gaps. They're not going to sit and wait. They're not two gapping and trying to push the thing along the line of scrimmage. They're trying to make plays in the backfield. And a lot of that is great, but you're going to get gashed a few times too. We got hurt a little bit in the run game, which is what I'm expecting this weekend out of the Niners. is we got hurt a little bit in the run game in the third quarter by Buffalo. They started coming downhill with the run game, and I would assume that Kyle's looking at that tape saying, hey, we could get McCaffrey going downhill in the run game, so we're probably going to get a steady diet of that. But getting back to Brick, he's a good guy. He played the game. I think there's a value to having been in the trenches a little bit. He was a good linebacker, obviously, out there in San Francisco, and learned the game that way. And he talked about how he matured over the last 3 or 4 years under Coach Saleh up in New York. You know, he had a chance to be a defensive coordinator down here under Dan Quinn, did a good job, was the coordinator for a season down here as well, but then had to go someplace else, much like Raheem Morris did, who was on that same staff. And those guys, kind of maybe found themselves a little bit in another place, and they brought it here to Atlanta.
Two last ones for you, Dave. Do you have a favorite rookie? I mean, I think the Niners have a good rookie class, but I'm looking at this Atlanta class. Pierce is an edge force. Jalen Walker is one of the greatest athletes coming out of the draft last year. And then you mentioned Watson Bowman. I thought they picked off maybe the two best safeties in the entire draft, and they got them in the same year. One in the third round, one in the fourth round. Do you have a favorite of the rookies that you've seen?
Yeah, it's kind of tough. They've all contributed. I think all of them have some really cool leadership qualities to them too. You know, the two guys in the back end, Watson, Bowman, had 24 career interceptions between them in college football, and I think they ran 7 of them back for touchdowns. They just made plays in the back end, and then the two guys up front, Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr., obviously wreaking havoc. I guess that the guy that really sticks out to me that looks like could develop into maybe, the green dot guy that's making calls on defense or one of those real leaders, Jalen Walker. It's hard to go against what Kirby Smart does at Georgia to get guys ready to play in the National Football League. They come in so prepared. They practice so hard in Athens to get ready for games at Georgia that when it's almost like when they come to the National Football League, it's a breath of fresh air because they're not having to work quite as hard, and they got to gear it back up. They got to get back to that Georgia mode. So I think that the way he spoke, the way he understood what his role was going to be, and then almost to take on a leadership role as a young guy, to know that his work ethic translates to other players, was really impressive to me. Not to say the other guys don't have some of that, but Jalen Walker stuck out like that.
Man, Arch, we appreciate your time, man. Hey, it's awesome to catch up with you. And one last one on the way out the door. You were there when Shanahan was there as the offensive coordinator. What do you think of Shanahan? Do you have a relationship with him? What do you think of him as a football coach? You've been around some great offensive coaches and some great offensive masterminds. Where do you rank Kyle Shanahan around the coaches you've been around?
Yeah, Kyle would be right at the top of the scale. I mean, he'd be in one of the 2 or 3 best I've been around. I think that, I don't think I'm saying anything that people don't already know. Obviously, he comes from some pretty good lineage. His pop was a pretty good coach in his own right, and a lot of stuff we're seeing around the National Football League, you can trace back to his dad. I mean, you pick a team, whether it's Minnesota, or whether it's Washington, or whether it's the Rams or the 49ers, or here in Atlanta. I mean, they all are running some semblance of what Mike ran when he was coaching. So, but Kyle has a lot of those same skill sets. And I think that the thing I admire about Kyle more than anything else is his ability to probably adjust in game. I think that when he sees stuff that's not working, then he finds something else to get you with. And I think that's why San Francisco's been so successful. I know last year was a tough one because of the injuries and all those kind of things they had to go through, lost a lot of manpower that were making plays. But, I mean, they've been right in the mix the last 4 or 5 years, and it's because of the way Kyle designs his offense. And you remember Mike used to be able to plug anybody in to play running back. It was unbelievable. It seemed like whoever he plugged in at running back was an unbelievable player. And Kyle's been doing some of that with the quarterback position as well. So he's just a very impressive guy, leaves no stone unturned. We'll have our work cut out for us on Sunday night.
Man, Dave, I just checked your Wikipedia, man. What a lengthy career, huh? From high school football in Idaho to getting, the Falcons in the mid 80s, finishing up in the late 90s in the Canadian League with Edmonton. In the midst there, we got together with the Gold Miners in the early 90s, but San Antonio, Ottawa, you were with the Eagles, the Sacramento Surge in the World League with Kay. The Chargers, the Skins way back, the Dolphins. Man, do you ever think back? I mean, how's the body feel these days? I would imagine you probably got a few bumps and bruises.
That's correct. As you and I are talking right here, I got an ice pack on my back, so that might tell you a little bit about how the body kind of transitioned through those 13 or 14 years of playing pro ball, and of course 4 years of playing college football too. So most of us feel that way, but the one thing I will say is I got a chance to meet some incredible people like yourself that taught me a lot about the game. Hopefully I've been able to share some of that with other people, and I certainly got a chance to see all of North America. That's for damn sure. I was all over the place, so I got a chance to get a good geography lesson.
Exactly. Yeah, you're like Rand McNally now. I mean, you could start your own guide. Arch, great to talk to you, man. Have a great call on Sunday. Good luck to the Falcons, man. I mean, I think the Falcons are a sleeper Super Bowl team this year. I know it seems crazy. Penix is going to have to develop. Some good breaks are going to have to happen, but I see good things coming for this bunch, and I wish you nothing but success and good health to you and your family going forward. Thanks again for jumping on KNBR.
Great speaking with you, man. Really appreciate the words. Thanks for the kindness, and I hope you're right. I hope we're destined for good stuff. But to you and your family, take care, bud.
KNBR, the sports leader.
real talented running back. I mean, he's one of the faster guys in the league. He's got real good balance, pure talent as a runner, how good he is in the pass game. I mean, when you can do both like that, you're going to get touches. I mean, it always starts with touches with running back, but when you can do it in the pass game too, it goes up, and he's got a lot of good guys around him, which makes it even easier for him.
Faithful Larry Kruger's rocking the red and gold as 49ers forecast continues on KNBR, the sports leader. Sports leader.
All right, coming down the home stretch on a Saturday, thanks to Raph, thanks to the great David Archer. Niners and Falcons go tomorrow, the 83rd matchup in this series. These are former division rivals. Niners lead the series 48 wins, 33 losses, 1 tie. They're 29-12 here on the West Coast. Niners are favored to win the game. NBC will have the call. Tirico Collinsworth, Melissa Stark on the sideline. Guy Haberman sitting in for our guy Greg Papa with Tim Ryan on the radio call. We'll have that for you. I'll join Adam Copeland, Todd Husak, Tracy Sandler, and the whole group, Tim Webb, for Niner pregame tomorrow, as well as a segment on the postgame show. So listen for that. There's a bunch of broadcasts tomorrow. Not only is it not only the Niners have, of course, the radio side with Guy Haberman and Tim Ryan. Now we got the TV side. You got the Niners Spanish broadcast. There's also a Westwood One national broadcast of the game with Ryan Radke and Marcel Reese. So a bunch of different broadcasts. I tweeted out earlier this week who, I don't know what gave me this idea, but we were talking about underrated football players. I was listening to a conversation. Underrated football players that time has forgotten, but real football fans never do. So I said, who is the most underrated player in 49ers history? And I said, I'll go first. And I'm going to go with nose guard Michael Carter, possibly the most dominant run defending nose guard in the history of the NFL. Take whoever your favorite guy is, Jerry Ball, Casey Hampton, whoever it is, Gilbert Brown, Warren Sapp, I don't know, whoever you want to go with inside. Reggie White, to me, when you talk about nose guards, the line forms behind this guy. Michael Carter, the former Olympic silver medalist, I believe, in the 84 games. He was a Niner in the late 80s, and he was awesome. Awesome. You could not run in the A-gaps with Michael Carter. So I asked the Twitter audience, I'm like, all right, give me your most underrated 49er in history. And here's what they came up with. One guy says he's going to go with Jeff Fuller. The guy was bigger, special, bigger than Lott, may have been hit just as hard. Career-ending injury paralyzed him. That was the game at Stanford. Eddie D, to this day, pays for Jeff Fuller. That's what makes Eddie D, Eddie D. And that's what makes the Niners a family to some degree. Gestures like that. Eddie D took care of his guys. Fuller was awesome. Anthony says Mike Wilson. Mike Wilson. Nobody ran the 2-minute out pattern better than Mike Wilson. Steve says Jeff Garcia. Jeff Garcia, the most underrated 49er of all time. Tim says John Taylor. The duo of Rice and Taylor isn't talked about enough. I love John Taylor. Roderick says, yes, Krugs. Michael Carter was one of my favorites. He was one of the great run stuffers. I remember when Jimmy Johnson tried to run Emmitt Smith in the 92 NFC title game down the Niners' throat on the goal line into just should have kicked the field goal. Instead, he's like, no, I'm going to try to go for the touchdown. And the Niners brought Michael Carter off the sideline, and he was so enormously strong, and Stepnoski, he just threw Stepnoski away and was just like, no. It was a beautiful moment, even though the Niners lost that game. If you were a Michael Carter fan, it was a great Michael Carter moment. I'll give you one more Michael Carter moment. This is Niner lore. One of my best friends, he's no longer with us, the late, great Bill Urbanek, longtime NFL coach with the Raiders, coach with the Bengals, coached against the 49ers for the Bengals in Super Bowl 23. He was the Bengals defensive line coach. That was the day that Crumry went out with a gruesome injury. Maybe the greatest Super Bowl of all time, Super Bowl 23. Montana to Taylor in the back of the end zone in Miami for the game winner. But people they remember that. But they don't remember how the Niners really won that game. And my good buddy Bill Urbanek used to tell me this story when we were together in the Canadian League. And he said Michael Carter got up on the nose. Like, this kind of goes back to the Kirby Smart thing from last week where he was talking. Everybody thought he was calling a timeout. Instead, he was trying to say that, hey, the Clemson defenders are clapping and they're interrupting the snap count. And then he got called for a timeout, and he was just mocking clapping to the officials. Anyway, Urbanik told me back in the day that Carter, in that key situation at the end, got in Dave Remington, who was the former Outland Trophy winner, was the center for the Bengals, got in his ear. Carter used to line up kind of cockeyed on the nose. The Niners ran a 34 front. He was right there inside Remington's ear, and he started yelling the snap count as Boomer Esiason was trying to get that play called. And Remington and Esiason fumbled the snap. And Boomer fell on it. But that was going to be the touchdown that put that thing on ice. Instead, it wound up being a fumble recovery, and the Bengals then kicked a field goal and handed the ball back to Joe Montana with time on the clock. And we all know how it ended. So the underrated hero of Super Bowl 23 was Michael Carter for yelling in the ear of Dave Remington. Is probably illegal at this point. But I mean, it's genius, man. And Remington and Esiason fumbled the snap. They didn't get the run play off. I'm not sure if it was Ickey Woods or who it was at that point who was trying to run it in, but they couldn't run it in. They settled for the field goal. They gave the ball back to Joe with 3:20 on the clock. Thanks for coming. And I remember I used to talk to Billy, who was the defensive line coach. He said Sam Weish was pacing up and down the sideline saying, come on, bring something new. Show him something else. And he said, Bill was sit there and said, you know what? At that point, everybody there knew Joe Montana was going to beat you. And it was just a matter of time. It was inevitable. The feeling of inevitable doom. He said it was like, at that point, we knew Montana was Montana. We knew he was magical. We knew he was going to beat us, and he beat us. Thank you to Jerry Rice, Roger Craig, and others. And, of course, John Taylor at the end. All right, couple others here. Heath Ramos says Keith Fawnhorst is a name that never gets mentioned. He had a really good career with the Niners, very underrated Niner. Who else do we have here? A bunch of people weighing in. Tom Jensen says Eric Wright, game-saving tackle in the 81 NFC Championship game. No question. Career game-ending interception of Marino in Super Bowl 19. No question. Eric Wright belongs on the all-time 49er team. He was an awesome player, an awesome athlete, an athlete that was really before his time. Gary Long says, great conversation topic. I'm going with Cedric Hardman. Cedric Hardman piled up a ton of sacks before they even kept that stat. If they did, I think we'd be talking about Cedric Hardman quite a bit more than we do. We don't talk a lot about Cedric Hardman. He's one of the greatest Niners of all time. Partly because of the way that the sack totals have been kept through time, he's kind of forgotten. He was an incredible sack master in the 70s. Who else do we have here weighing in? Somebody says Carl Monroe, most underrated Niner. A vote for Merton Hanks as the most underrated Niner. A vote for Freddie Solomon, the late Freddie Solomon. A vote for Kevin Fagan. Well, that's a great one. Fagan had a stool that he would bring to practice. That's how bad his knees were. He would sit on his stool at practice. Dan Buns gets a vote. Thank you, third down, Dan Buns on the goal line against Alexander in the flat. Should have been a touchdown. Instead, Dan Buns, 57. Very much a Greenlaw-like tackle for Dan Buns on third down on the crucial fourth down stuff in the Super Bowl 16 in Pontiac. Carlton Williamson, according to Matt Dennis, most underrated Niner. Another vote for Keith Fawnhorst. We got a vote for, here's a great one from Steiner. Chet Brooks, a vote for Chet Brooks. Rod Woodson, Randy Cross, Delaney Walker, Steve Wallace, Garrison Hurst. Eric Davis was a dog, according to RVM Baltarzar. Justin Smith, the Cowboy. A vote for Garrison Hurst. Charlie Garner, 707 says, Charlie Garner gave us two great 1,000-yard seasons while Hurst healed up. Charlie Garner was tough. He was tough. Mike Yapati gets a vote. Another vote for Cedric Hardman, Julian Peterson, Keena Turner. I love it. Guy put a picture of Keena Turner's football card. Harris Barton gets a vote. Guy McIntyre's getting a vote. Paul Hofer's getting a vote. John Taylor. Oh, this is a great one. Justin
I got a
Smith,
vote, Larry.
How
about Brandon Lloyd?
Brandon Lloyd, who had one of the greatest catches of all
amazing.
time. He was a character, man. He was a character. I'll give you one of my favorites, bar none. I loved William Floyd in '94. Oh my God, you were not stopping William Floyd on the goal line, man. You were not. He was going to put that head down, and he was just going to barrel you over. How about Brent Jones? How about Roger Craig? So many good ones. So many good ones. We could do this almost every week. All right, that's going to do it for us. Couple things to look for in the game before we get out of here. We're going a little over, but we've got Infinity Sports Radio, and then we've got the Georgia football game coming up in a little bit on the leader. Two guys that I'm really eager to see this week that I really think are going to be very, very good 49ers. Nick Martin and Jordan Watkins. Watkins was fielding punts this week. I'd love to see him back there doing it, but more importantly, I'd like to see them line him up from scrimmage and throw him the rock. This guy's got 4.37 speed, and he's kind of bulky. He's not a tiny little guy that can get knocked off his stride. He's got some heft. I said to him, I go, you got a message for Niner fans? And he's like, get ready for the show. And I'm like, yeah, no question. Jordan Watkins is the truth. Wait until you see this guy. You're going to love Niner fans. You're going to love Jordan Watkins. Love him. And the only guy you're going to love more than Jordan Watkins is Nick Martin. And I can't wait to see how Saleh utilizes Nick Martin. He's probably going to be up on game day for the first time. Do not confuse the fact that he's been inactive the first 3 weeks as some kind of he can't play or they don't like him. No, that's not it. This guy can play. He's just behind Curtis Robinson and Luke Gifford as a special teamer right now, and they're getting the special team nod. That's it. But he's going to play, and he's going to play the rest of the year, and I think we're going to see some great things from Nick Martin. So really excited to see Nick Martin, really excited to see Jordan Watkins. I'm hoping both those guys impact this game. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Enjoy a beautiful day in Northern California. Thanks to Raf for producing. Thanks to all of you for listening. Thanks to Arch for stopping by. Have a great Saturday. We'll see you tomorrow as part of the pregame festivities on the Sports Leader.
KNBR, the Sports Leader.